So in this lesson today we're going to be exploring how you can use simple geometric shapes like circles, squares, rectangles and triangles to communicate a message, and things that are abstract can still have real-world messages. For example, a triangle might be aggressive and a circle might be safe or soft, and designers have used these for hundreds of years really, and there's lots of different examples. We looked at a little bit of this in our Russian constructivism. This example on the screen at the moment shows actually a battle during the Russian Revolution, and this is kind of a red wedge or beating the white army, the royalists, the Tsar army. And in lots of different art and design, shapes have been used to communicate very simple messages and very complex messages. These are some examples where shapes are trying to communicate music, specifically jazz. This is a poster for a film, and they're using simplified shapes to create this human form. So we are already understanding that this looks like some form of human. And you might also make links to, like a white chalk line. And over here, there's almost like a cutout, as if this tap has been cut away from these two color shapes. So almost in effect, this is not a shape, it's just the removal of this, potentially. So there's lots of different ways that shapes have been used. These are examples from a design of the London Underground using the colors of the routes, but in a shape format. Here, a shape of the Coke bottle has been used to create a calligram, so text has actually been used to form the shape. There is actually no bottle here, but the shape of the text has enabled us to understand that it is a bottle shape. So in today's lesson, you're just going to be using black, the color black, and simple shapes, like these examples here. So this one is trying to show texture, which is one of the visual elements of design. This one here is trying to show form and rhythm. And these are different variations of them. So this is a second variation of texture. So there's not just one way to communicate the same word. And that's what I'd like you to think about today, is different ways you can communicate the same word. So you can choose from this list, or you can come up with your own words. But you're only going to be using abstract shapes. Now some of the shapes, like this example, are small. And this is still a square, but it's been cropped by the edge of this square canvas. This is the design space. So it's now created a triangle, although it is actually a square, but you can't see the rest. Here, the same sort of things happen. These are all the same circle, but they've explored different scale, different direction, and then it's almost created this sort of whirlpool or spiral, so you get a sense of depth and form, three-dimensional form. The space becomes almost like a one-point perspective. You can imagine falling into this space. It doesn't look flat anymore. This one on the right also produces a sense of rhythm and movement. It looks like these are falling down this slope, but they're not. It's an illusion. Okay, we can't actually touch them and they're not falling down, but that is what's potentially being communicated. So the first thing you need to do is open up Photoshop, and then you're going to create a new document by clicking File, New. Once you've done that, you're going to choose a square format, so you need to change the width and the height to be the same. It doesn't matter if it's in millimeters or what measurements you use, but it'd probably be better to do millimeters or centimeters rather than something like inches, because your document will be too big. You need to make sure the resolution is 300 pixels per inch. That allows for the best quality of printing if you were to ever print this larger than your book. But it's just good standard practice. Then you're going to click Create. And as you can see, you've got a square, a white square. And we're going to keep this square white. Later on I'm going to show you how to start with a black space and use white shapes. But for now we're going to use black shapes on this white background. So this is our background layer, and we're going to work on a layer on top. It's really important that you work on new layers. If you do everything on the same layer, it's very difficult to move things around individually. So this is very good design practice to work on different layers. So you click on New Layer, it creates a blank new layer. On your toolbar, on the side, you've got the option for shapes. If you click and hold, if you notice it's got a little triangle in the bottom. If you click and hold your left mouse, it comes up with options. So, for example, a rectangle. If I hold, click and left drag and then release, it creates a rectangle. If I hold shift and click, it creates a perfect square. So that's always useful to know. If I click and drag and I like this shape, what I can then do is duplicate it very simply. And how I did that was after I've made the shape, so I'll make the shape again, click and drag and let go. I then used the move tool, or V, and I held Alt, and if you click and hold Alt, it makes a new shape. And as you notice, it's also made this on a new layer. Now with this shape created, I can do different things. I can hold shift and I can change the size of it. I can also go to the corner here with my arrow, and as you notice, instead of it being a black arrow or a diagonal, it's become a curve. And if I click, I can change the direction and it comes up with the degrees. If I hold shift, it will change in perfect 30-degree increments. If I want to be even more precise, I can go to Edit, Transform, and Rotate. I can also do the same with Scale, and I can decide how much I want to rotate. So for now, I'm just going to, and then you press Enter, and now you can move this around. If I go on to, as you notice, I can't move this other shape around because it's not on the same layer. I have this layer selected. So if I want to move this smaller rectangle, I need to click on the other layer. It's now able to be moved. I can't move the other one. If they were both on the same layer, so if I shift click, click one, hold shift, click the other layer, right click and merge. Now if I move them, they both move together. That's why it's really important to work on more than one layer, so you have more control over individual shapes. You might want them to be on the same layer if you're doing like a line, and then you'll move them all together. That might be important. But for now, I'm just going to go back a few steps. To go back, you go to Undo, Step Back. They're up here. So, if you don't like a layer, you can also delete it with the Delete layer at the bottom, or just press Delete. So I'm going to use this, and as you notice, if you go towards the edge of your canvas, it crops. So that might be useful when you start to do some form of direction with your work. You might also want to use those rulers again that we learned in the mock-up if you wanted things to go in a perfect sort of space. So here you can see it's changing, it tells you how far down the canvas is. That's 0, and this should be 50 or 5 centimeters because this is in millimeters. If you hold shift, it will go in increments. This one's going in 0.1 centimeters. So you might want to use those if you want things in a perfect straight line or in a diagonal, etc. So for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and create some form of tension. So I'm going to use this square. And it's really important to think about the space. So this object is positive space, and the white is going to be the negative space. They're both equally important, and how you use both of them will determine how strong your design is. So sometimes it's good to have lots of negative space, and other times it's good to have lots of positive space. It really depends on what you're trying to communicate. Sometimes it's useful to have balance in this, other times not so much. Some asymmetry is also useful. So I like this shape. I'm going to duplicate this shape with Alt, and now I'm going to hold Shift and scale this down. So I want this to be quite small because I'm creating tension between this small, kind of fragile square and this very dangerous square. So what I need to do is I need to line this up. So I want the points to meet. Now to do that, I'm going to have to decide how I can get these to meet with the rulers. So I'm going to put a ruler here. If it's not working and it's not snapping, I can snap to guides and make sure that's actually going to snap to that guide. Like that. And then I'm going to do the next one. That's snapped. And now I'm going to do some increments. So if I move this like this, I do the same from this point. When I then move this, it should, if I hide my guides, be in line. So I've used my rulers to help me align these two corners. So this is my tension. I've just created tension. I can move it closer to create even more tension. That might be better. You can also use your space, your up and down direction keys to very lightly adjust where a shape is, like this. So this is just up and down on the arrow keys. And because I'm on the more advanced Photoshop, the most recent one, when I'm selected, this box comes up, which can be a bit annoying to see where something is. So I just click on a different tool and it disappears. So I'm just going to move that down one. And I think that's created some pretty good tension right there. So I might save that one. So I could go to File, Save As. I'd want to save it as, if I'm happy to print it and I don't want to use it anymore, I'd save it as a TIFF or a PDF, Photoshop PDF, and then I can print that off. If I do ever want to use it again, then I would save it, File, Save As a Photoshop document, so a .psd. If I'm happy with this, you've also got to make sure, if you had lots of layers, you want to flatten them, so you go to Layer and Flatten Image. That will now bring everything together. That means I can't move anything separate anymore. It's all one layer. But that just means you save in file size when you save. I don't want to do that right now, so I'm going to go back. So that's my idea of tension. I might try different versions. I might try, for example, if I delete these, and I start again, I might try something else. So maybe I'll try a triangle. Now, a triangle is not an option on here, but there's a trick. You use a polygon tool, and then at the top you can choose the sides. So if I choose 5, it will be a 5-sided shape, pentagon. If I press 3, it's now going to be an equilateral triangle. So that's how you can create a triangle with the shape tool. Now I might try and use tension in a different way. Maybe this is going to go here. I'm going to very quickly, with the Alt key, with this selected, after I've pressed Enter, I'm going to duplicate them and Shift click to scale them down. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing, Alt click. I might want to rotate this a bit. Whoops, I accidentally warped it, so I don't want to do that. Press Enter, hold Alt, Shift and click. Now in this one I'm going to kind of not cheat, but do a different thing. I'm going to use a second shape. So I'm going to use a circle. And this circle is going to be surrounded by the triangles. Now what I've done is put it on the same layer, so I don't want that. I'm going to want to make a new layer and then make my shape, holding Shift, otherwise it will be an ellipse if I don't hold Shift. And then using the Move tool, I'm going to move this shape, zoom in so I can see it a bit better. I'm going to move this shape and put it in between. It's going to create some tension. Now at the moment, if I zoom in, it's a bit pixelated. So to stop that happening, I'm going to have to rasterize them. So at the moment the shapes are still rasterized vector images. So I'm going to rasterize the layer. Now it should, maybe the quality of what I'm working on is quite small. Yeah, it's only 5 centimeters. So I'd work a bit bigger next time. So that's created some tension. I'd save that one, and then I'd work on a new one. Now, to do the opposite, to work on black with white shapes, it's simple. You make a new layer with the paint bucket tool, which is here. If it's not, it will be this gradient. You click and hold, and then you choose the paint bucket, or you can press G. And then you're going to choose black as the foreground color. So you double click on this, and it comes up with the color menu. But you just need to go into the corner, which is black, bottom left corner, and then you're going to fill. Then you make a new layer, and then with white as your foreground color, you can click on these here to switch them, or press X to switch them. You are then going to do the same thing again. You're going to explore how to create meaning using shapes. So now I'm doing the opposite. I'm going to be working in white on black. And there you have it. That's a simple way to explore shapes in Photoshop.